I think I've got this thing. There's a button here. I think this is it. I think I remember how this works. Isn't that it? Hey there, friends. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time it might be in your part of the world. Welcome back to C# with CSharpFritz. This is Developer Talk Radio. This is where we get to answer your questions. We get to talk about some things and learn about programming languages here live on Twitch and YouTube and all the like. How you doing there? I see chat is jumping in. They're online here. Let's say hello to them. We've got a little bit of an AMA we're going to do here for the next 40 minutes. Of course, that's how we start the stream. That's how we start these sessions. So we can talk about and answer questions about all kinds of things that might be on your mind, whether it's about my employer, Microsoft, it's about Azure, Visual Studio Code, .NET. We're going to talk about all those things in an AMA fashion for the next 39, 40 minutes here live on stream. Let me scroll up and say hello to folks that are here on chat. Omer is here. Hello on YouTube. Rahul, how you doing there? Very excited. It's been a while since I've been here. Of course, since I was streaming on Mondays, if there's holidays in May here in the States, we had Microsoft Build. I was away for VS Live, so I missed 3 weeks in a row there. We're back. We're up and running, and we're going to move to Wednesdays now. Same time, so that quite frankly, those Monday holidays that are so frequent here in the States, and me traveling and needing to be at events and presenting a workshop or something on Monday morning, we can kind of work around that. And even when I'm on the road, if it's a Wednesday, I should be able to do this stream. We'll see how that plays out in the future. The next few months are quite clear. Nothing that's going to interrupt us. We should be able to continue very easily here on Wednesdays for the next few months. How you doing there, Chuck Beasley on Twitch? 77 Lucky on Twitch. Hello. Thindall, welcome in over there on Twitch. Yeah, the very timely that you jumped in here. C# Titans on Twitch. Greetings to you in Australia and a very late evening there. My goodness. Condor, how you doing there? Welcome in. DJ Deepex. Cheerio aus dem Sonnigen Deutschland. Out from, I'm sorry, connecting in and watching from Germany. Hello. How you doing there, Nick in Greece? Excited for the C# Dev Kit. Let's talk about that for a second. Let me get a browser open here, and we can talk about the announcement yesterday and what's going on with that. Let me run over to Dev Blogs, and we can grab that announcement. Yeah, let's do that. Head over this one. There we go. I'm over here. I was over there, but now I'm over here now. There we go. So, just announced yesterday, C# Dev Kit for Visual Studio Code. So there's been a lot of folks that have been asking, hey, what can you do to make the C# developer experience on Visual Studio Code better? And this is the answer from the team at Microsoft that builds all the developer tools for .NET folks. So this is an extension that adds on to the existing C# extension that gives you a whole bunch of new functionality inside of Visual Studio Code. So you have the C# extension that provides the basic language services support that we've had for a long time, maintained independently, all the great stuff that's open source and available for you to do there. So it's an evolution from where OmniSharp was. Rich C# editing experience, no change to the licensing, it's all MIT. They're adding into it IntelliCode. So AI-powered start and whole line completion, optional extension that's available for you, and it's licensed with your Visual Studio subscription. They're also making available Solution Explorer, a native test explorer, so a much better test explorer, and that's available for you as a Visual Studio user. Lots of new capabilities that are going to seem really familiar for you if you're a Visual Studio developer over in Visual Studio Code. So really great to see. There's all kinds of details here on the blog post. I will share that link into chat so you can learn more about this. If you're currently a Visual Studio user, you can get those other Visual Studio features in Visual Studio Code now. Check it out with that link that I just shared for you, and lots more that you could see. Performance improvements, accuracy improvements that you're going to see coming through, and things that are familiar to you as a Visual Studio developer in the new C# Dev Kit. And this is V1. They want your feedback, bug reports, as they're evolving and delivering more capabilities with that. So that's new. That's coming and available in the Visual Studio Code marketplace. So it's available today for you to go out and check out and download. You have a virtual machine on infrastructure as a service that's not behaving. Oh, wonderful. How you doing there? Too much hassle. How you doing? Renee is here from Australia. How you doing, Renee? 77 Lucky says, well, the license stuff is not so nice about. It's the same license that you have with Visual Studio. And they're not taking away things that you do have in Visual Studio Code. They're augmenting it with stuff that you have in your Visual Studio license. So, all good things there. Hey there, Ahmed. Good morning to you. Code coverage? Don't know. I don't think it's something. Check the blog post. I haven't worked with the testing enough to know if it is doing anything with code coverage. So we had Microsoft Build a few weeks ago as well. That so much happening as part of Microsoft Build. You saw rollout and discussion about GitHub Copilot and how we can use GitHub Copilot and chat interaction. So you get that same chat GPT type of experience inside Visual Studio. Some fantastic demos of that at Build. There's integration that'll give you similar functionality in Visual Studio Code as well. Really, really cool to see how we're making it easier for you to learn other programming languages, get help automatically, and insert appropriate code that should build and work with your projects and in the context of your projects inside the Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code tools. The ability to ask it to explain what methods do, the ability for it to generate tests for you. Highlight a block of code and say, generate tests for this. It'll generate those tests, and you can have it insert it automatically into your code files. Really, really cool stuff that's just going to make us more productive developers. I like seeing that. Let me get some music playing here in the background, and we'll get in and talk about more of this. Of course, I'm going to play Stream Beats. This is the Synthwave playlist. Here we go. Check it out at streambeats.com. There's playlists there for all kinds of different genres. I like these chill instrumental bits here, like the Synthwave playlist, but big thanks to Harris Heller and his team of creators for putting together this DMCA-free, royalty-free music that we can listen to today. TJ on YouTube says they watched the performance and AOT talk with Damian Edwards and David Fowler. Pretty cool and interesting. There's a lot of great stuff that we forget about as developers that they went back and highlighted. Because we kind of take advantage as .NET developers. We take for granted that .NET compiles to an intermediary runtime and then compiles and runs. And there's a garbage collector out there. And there's subtle ways that you can shift your code so that you aren't creating as much garbage, as much memory that needs to be cleaned up. You're using slightly less processor. You're making better use of your threads. And they had some very good tips in there, whether you watch the video that was published from Build, or you watch, they had a discussion yesterday on the ASP.NET Core, the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. Great tips on both of them. I think we need to take the transcripts of those and turn them into a blog post with some high-level things. Hey, optimize for this. Use Entity Framework by making sure that you remember to use these things as no tracking and whatnot. Really good topics to go there. Yes, you did try to keep your trolling to a minimum in chat. I was one of the moderators for Build, and I saw everything in chat, that is. Did I look into the Dev Home preview? Asks 77Lucky. No, I haven't looked into it yet. I don't run any of the Windows 11 developer previews. I run like the latest beta version, right? I forget what they call it. Let me bring up my Windows Update settings here. The Windows Insider, it's not the yeah, I run the beta channel, so I get the version just before release. The dev channel and canary channel for what I run here on stream wasn't stable enough for what the things that I was doing. Gosh, is my stream not running properly because of something in OBS, something in Visual Studio, something? I had too many preview things running at once, whether it's Visual Studio preview or OBS preview or .NET preview tools. I needed some stability. So I haven't seen Dev Home yet, only because it hasn't been deployed to the ring that I'm on. But there's some interesting things going on there where Windows 11 is going to give you the ability to set up and configure effectively a developer location on disk that you can allocate, that they'll tune, right? They'll tune the malware checkers and whatnot so that it all lives over there. Better storage and allocation for packages, whether it's from npm or NuGet or pip, whatever it might be. Better storage and maintenance of those in one place, and appropriate backups and archiving of some of that stuff, I believe, was also in there. Status monitoring, tools and widgets that come out. Neat stuff that's available for you in there. That's something, Thindal says that's something that he really hates. Writing tests, it's awesome having them. Now you can get 75% of the way there with test writing for free. Right, GitHub Copilot, because it generates tests for you. If you have unit test projects out there, you'll be able to highlight a method, generate tests for this, and it will generate the code, and you can insert it into the project quickly and easily. Really nice to be able to do. There were tools that were available that would generate some code for you for tests, but the way that it's all wrapped up has a little bit of that Chat GPT sensibility around it. But the power of GitHub Copilot, where it knows that code's actually going to compile, all leads to a really good experience. Hey, how you doing there, Tarek? Welcome. It has given you some suggestions that won't compile, though. I have seen that at times. It was particularly bad some time ago, but as the months have gone by, as I've been using GitHub Copilot, it's gotten better. There's definitely some things that it's kind of making up on the fly, but as you get closer to working with just smaller lines of code and don't tell it generate a huge block of code, it generates those single lines of code very, very accurately. DJ Deepex says, to use an own domain with an Azure static web app, is there only DNS authentication, or is there something similar? I need a little bit more context there, DJ Deepex. To use your own custom domain, is there only DNS authentication? You can also publish a file to your static web app that will do the authentication for you, that proves that you own. Yeah, I thought you could do that. That proves that you own the DNS. I thought there was a way to do that as well. But the DNS authentication is easy to deploy if your name for your application is managed outside of Azure. Of course, if you brought your name your DNS into Azure, it clicks right through. So, Thin Dog complimenting me. Look at this. Windows Insider Dev Channel is the only time you've totally borked a Windows install. And, right, you're taking something that isn't beta. You're taking early previews. So, buyer beware. Right? Yeah, could be some headaches. Tarek, that's fine. I can answer that question. What apps have I made in my professional career? So, before Microsoft, I worked for a component vendor called Telerik. They're now Progress Software, but before them, I worked for. Gosh, I worked for a startup company that built education. It built education staffing software. Basically, if it managed the absences for teachers and other staff at schools. I was involved in the construction and development of a version of that website that ran for folks in all industries. A lot of use of resources and multi-tenant architecture, SQL database, lots of stored procedures, lots of ASP.NET web forms to start, MVC, Web API, Angular as I was being rolled out as I left the company. So I've spent a lot of time building that type of thing. Built a whole bunch of internal applications for call centers to do data transfers between systems, ETL operations, extract, transform, and load operations between multiple databases and services. Transferring data over FTP and other protocols. And before that, built a finance website that, well, the company has since been acquired several times, but a company website that helped, finance website that helped portfolio managers manage their portfolios. I completely redesigned and built that. That was with Classic ASP way back in the day. So that was a thing that I built and worked through. So I've been through a couple different industries and built some large-scale websites and managed them for a while. DJ Deepex wants to use example.com that directs to your web app. But what if you can't change the DNS? Well, if you can't change the DNS, then do you really own the DNS? You're not so much changing... You're adding entries into the DNS configuration. So that's... If you don't own it, you can't make changes to it. If you can't make changes to your DNS, you don't really own it. It's... There's an A record you have to add, and there's a text record. There's two records that you have to add to it. Blazor, Mr. Magoo, good to see you. Says, Copilot chat read my mind the other day. Totally correct code to extend your display just from you typing @ on click. Extend display. Okay. All right. It can be scary good at times. There was a great conversation I had with somebody the other day on Twitter. They were talking about how they wanted to use auto mapper to map between different types, and I've started moving into the feeling of just create a conversion, create an operator that does the cast for you, and then you can use typical C# syntax. Hey, I'm casting from this type to this type, and there it is. But if you're writing that operator, gosh, you have to write, well, here's the mapping between fields to do this. That's such a pain in the neck to write. but Copilot will generate most of that for you, and it's pretty accurate. I like that. I like that a lot, because now I'm effectively using an automapper type solution, and I'm getting the code generated for me by the machine. I don't have to think about it. It's great. Really good stuff. How you doing there, Carl? Carl Edwards is here from South Africa. Hello, hello. Carl asks, is there an alternative to CLR in Azure databases, the Common Language Runtime? Sorry if I've been asked that. No, I have not been asked that. What do you mean by an alternative to the Common Language Runtime? Common Language Runtime means that you're referring to .NET in my mind, because other languages don't have a Common Language Runtime. Other frameworks. So why do you need an alternative to it? I mean, if you're on Azure SQL or Oracle or MySQL or Postgres, you're going to program with some flavor of T-SQL, PL-SQL. If you're on MongoDB, well, you're programming and working with BSON data, and so on and so forth. Cassandra, CosmosDB, Gremlin, table storage. You don't have .NET embedded in those databases like you do in Azure. Azure's the only, in Azure SQL, Microsoft SQL Server is the only one that has the .NET runtime, CLR, embedded in the database. So I'm not quite sure what you're looking for there, Carl. Help me out there. Let's talk this through. Hello, Warm Peas is here on Twitch. How you doing there, JME Jam? Hello. Is that JME Jam? We're supposed to be Jammy Jam. Help me out. I want to make sure I pronounce your screen name right. Let's see. Andrew 1000 asks, does Microsoft have a sample SQL Server database project which shows best practices, T-SQL, code, database design, DevOps? That's a good question. I don't know of one off the top of my head. I'm going to put together a note here and ask my colleagues on the SQL Server team. Tables, T-SQL, design, DevOps. That's a good question. I'd love to be able to have something to point you to. Maybe even in the same vein as the eShop demos that we have for .NET, Visual Studio, and Visual Studio Code. Something to point you to that is that set of simple tables and sample data, but laid out, designed in a way that you can start up and take a look at and work with. Not a bad idea. Let me pass that along. If there's something out there, I'll add it into the notes for today's stream. And if there isn't, we'll give them a nudge and see if we can get some content built around that. I like that idea. Oliver, how you doing there? Oliver on YouTube asks, if I need to let multiple offices around the world use a SQL Azure database through an application, will one database be enough, or will I need one in each location of each office? That's a interesting question there, Oliver. And I hate to answer it this way, but it depends. What are you doing with the database? What are you doing with the application? Is this something where, and how big are the offices, right? You need to make sure you scale appropriately. If network were not an issue, and network is an issue when we do talk about worldwide access to applications, we want to make sure that we all appreciate that physics and the speed of light cannot be violated. It takes time for network traffic to route from Delhi to New York City, from Seattle to London. It takes time for traffic to flow. So if network were not an issue, do you have enough capacity if all of those folks were working on the same network segment as the database? it is possible to stand up read-only replicas that live in various data centers and synchronize with a primary database that exists in wherever headquarters is, a local data center for you. So for me, it would be East US. I would set up a primary in East US. If I had an office in Germany, I would probably want to set up then in Eastern Europe a read-only replica, so that for all of those front requests that those folks were making, if performance making requests back to the application running out of East US is too slow, and this is where you need to measure, I would stand up a read-only replica and a copy of my application in Eastern Europe. Have that primarily make its read-only requests to present and do normal interaction with the local database. Have any write operations go against service bus like we saw last time. Make a write request, put it on the service bus, and something that's local, some sort of a function application. We learned about function applications and service bus triggers. Something that's local to the primary database. Pull those messages off and update the database appropriately. The primary database. The read-only copy gets updated that's local in Eastern Europe, and you can present the refreshed data. So you end up with this circle, and as architectures grow and we start talking about distributed applications around the globe, these operations become trickier. So you need to think those through, need to understand how they work. We're going to stand up a SQL Server database on Azure SQL today, and we'll even set up a read-only replica of that, and we'll see how that works. Carl says, you were told that you cannot add CLR self-written utilities for handling unusual things like calculating BMI from unusual data. So if you have that code in C# already written, you can install and run that inside of SQL Server. You can do that. That certainly works. You can make that happen. You can also install that as put that out there as a microservice somewhere, and from within SQL Server, I want to say there are ways to make requests from a website. I haven't done that before, but I want to say there is a way to do that. Yeah, body mass index. Yep. That type of advanced calculation, I'm tempted to put outside of SQL Server and not embed inside of it. Can be done, but SQL Server is the only database that will allow you to run .NET code inside of it like that. Let me see here. Scrolling down. TJ asks, if Go can be used for systems programming, which is managed, why can't C# be used for the same thing? C# can be used for systems programming. There are parts of Windows that are built with C#. There are parts of many applications, many things that are built with C#. YARP, yet another reverse proxy, is built with C#. It can be done. It's when you start talking about systems programming, there are low-level things that you want to do with .NET and with C# that you need to start to optimize for. And the shortcuts and productivity that we get as managed developers, you start to move away from. And you want to start using pointers and external references. Those are things that I have purposely avoided teaching as part of this series, because they are more advanced things that the typical C# developer isn't going to be doing on a regular basis. But you can do if you need that highly optimized direct on the metal systems programming. Paint.net built with C#. There are tons of systems on Windows that are built with C#, and it's a question of choice. So it absolutely can. Yeah, it's a question of choice. It's a question of where you're comfortable, and there are folks who do enjoy building that. I mean, the .NET team has built the fastest web server available, Kestrel, with C#. These things can and have been done. Do folks want to do that? Well, C# isn't the shiny new thing that Go is. So folks don't spend their time looking at that when there's a perfectly reasonable C++ language that's sitting right next to C# in the same toolbox. So you have your choices, and that's okay. You can build with whatever language you like. C# is the language that I like and I'm very comfortable with and I prefer programming with. I want to spend some time with Go over the summer and learn more about it, spend some time with Rust. Those are things that make us better developers, to understand and know a little bit about other programming languages. It's not my cup of tea, but we'll take a look. Any chances of getting SSMS, so SQL Server Management Studio tables and Relationship Designer in Azure Data Studio? I don't know about that. I am not on the Data Studio team. I can't answer that question. The table designer is there in Data Studio. The relationships is not. So I can't speak towards their plans on that, but those are fair requests, and I'm sure they've heard it a number of times. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. Edson on YouTube, hello. For writing 10,000 rows of data or documents to a database, table, or container, Edson says, I haven't been able to get CosmosDB to perform on par with traditional SQL Server. Tips to improve performance. Tips to improve performance for inserting 10,000 rows of data. What do you mean by perform on par? What are you looking for there? Your CosmosDB, you're restricted by request units per second, so they're going to cap that. And which API are you using with Cosmos? Are you using Mongo? Are you using Postgres? The NoSQL? Different APIs are going to have different performance characteristics. And my friend Mark Brown would be who I would defer to for a little bit of help on a performance tuning question on Cosmos. Let's drop me a line on Twitter, and I can get you connected with some experts that can dig into that a little bit. I'm running into a similar performance issue inserting 10,000 records into SQL Server tables. I have a bunch of indexes on the table, so it's got a lot of data to update when we think about millions of records in a table or a collection. So how do we do that optimally? Well, we can throw more processor and more memory at it, but that's not always the best solution. Hey, Zach. We're doing well. Thank you. Apricot says, greetings from Ukraine. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well and staying safe. Thank you so much for tuning in. Fahad on YouTube with a question right here. Is it good to learn PHP? PHP just got a new JIT compilation engine. I haven't seen that. PHP is an interesting framework and language. Very much reminds me of classic ASP, where you write blocks of code and you intersperse them with HTML, and it's typically interpreted at runtime. But if there's a compilation engine here, well, that's going to improve things a bit. It's not bad. It's the language that they use to build and run Facebook and Etsy. It's nice. I think that depending on what you want to do with your knowledge. Do you want to build web applications? Do you want to build other types of applications? I agree. The question shouldn't be, should I learn PHP? But what is it you want to do? If you want to learn to build web applications, PHP is fine. You're going to want to spend time with JavaScript at some point. And then you're going to want to spend some time with a server-side technology. Node is a valid option there, but ASP.NET Core is a great option. Java's a great option. Python's a great option. You're going to want to find a language that you are comfortable with and try and work with that. So there's options there, and really, where do you want to go with that are the questions that I follow up with. PHP is fine to learn. I'm not going to tell you not to learn a programming language. Unless it's Fortran, don't learn how to punch cards. That's out of style. Nobody does that. But there's lots of great languages out there to learn, and if PHP is your entryway and you like it, great. We like the .NET languages here. There's really cool things that you can do with them that I would encourage you to check out as well. Laravel was made by Otwell, who was once a .NET developer. A significant number of .NET developers are working for Facebook on their PHP interpreter. So, yeah, what type of programming do you want to do? Do I know if Visual Studio for Mac will support GitHub Copilot? I do not know that. I haven't talked to the Visual Studio for Mac team in a while. Is it Intracat? Do learn COBOL if you want to have a job until you retire. COBOL is interesting, but it definitely a language whose time in the sun is setting. Zach Sanford on YouTube asks a question that could be a little off topic. Okay, when you fire up a new Blazor application, the template puts the C# code on the Razor page. Yes, it does. How hard is it to convert it to a code behind style? Very easy to do. I mean, you create a new class that has the same name as the base of the Razor file, but call it .razor.cs. So counter.razor.cs. You're going to inherit from, it's not base component. That's, I subclass it in my code. I forget the class you inherit from. And you can paste your code directly into that class. Component base. Thank you, Chuck Beasley. I called it base component because that's the way we used to name things. Base page, base control. And they called it component base. They turned around the naming on me here. So, but yeah. Create and you can just move that there. Now, my friend and Microsoft MVP, Jimmy Engstrom, put together a Visual Studio extension called Blazm, Blazm, that you can download and install in Visual Studio. You can, there's actions inside the Razor file that you can tell it, convert this to code behind, and it will do all of that work. Create the file, copy the content in the file for you. So, and it'll go the other way also. If you have the two files, it'll combine them into one if you'd like. So those options are available. You curse at Delphi a lot. Hey, Spaghetti Developer on Twitch. Hello. Jam says they're doing great things with Laravel and Symfony frameworks. PHP 7 and later is a lot better than previously. Oh, that's great. Good to hear that. It's always great to see technologies being advanced and improved. Cool stuff. He took ideas from a lot of frameworks, not just .NET. And look, all of the programming languages and frameworks are taking ideas from each other. They're all inspired to a certain point and going and growing and adding features based on what the other folks do. So that's okay. Everybody can do that, and if it makes your favorite tool better because you learn something that another tool, another language, another framework does, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. TJ asks, is Maui that uses native controls faster, or Avalonia, which uses the Skia engine, better for performance for cross-platform UI? You know what? I haven't done performance testing on those, and I haven't seen a good set of documentation on that. I do know that the Maui team is particularly focused on performance and getting things significantly faster for .NET 8. The initial previews look much improved. I don't know performance between Maui and Avalonia. I'm sure folks from Avalonia have posted messages about it, because as a framework vendor, they want to show here's how we compare to the Microsoft tools. I would have to consult their documentation. So this is the CSharp stream. You're watching a guy named CSharpFritz. Yeah, you should expect that I'm going to talk about C# here. And to be clear, there's a really cool, to add on to that, not to be clear, but to add on, if you are interested in PHP, there's a really great PHP compiler that works with ASP.NET Core and C# called PeachPy. You can find that at peachpy.io, and that'll take your PHP code, compile it, and run it on the .NET web server. Really cool stuff that you can try out. It also gives you then some cross-platform capabilities where from PHP you can call into .NET code, and from .NET code you can call into PHP. So find the set of tools that make you happy. Explore. And when you're early in your career, it's a good time to explore. Because if there's one constant for all of us as developers, it's you're always going to be learning. There's always something new happening, growing, changing. Companies are inventing new things. Developers are advancing their frameworks. There's new hardware being built. And we need to know how to work with those. So, always be learning. Find some place that fits and feels right for you, and ride that as long as you can, and it makes you happy. So, thank you, Ridge Raider. It's not the C# stream, it's the C# stream. Thank you. That's very kind. Kumar asks, why do we need to enable developer mode to run .NET MAUI applications? Because there's compilations and deployments that are happening into emulators and across hardware that you need in order to be able to integrate and work with those demos and things. So you need to be in developer mode, especially if you're running on Windows. Windows won't let you develop and deploy Windows applications unless you're in developer mode. The creator of Node was the one who created Deno. Right. Folks, get in. I'm not happy with how this works. You know what? I'm going to rethink it and rebuild and redeploy something that works with the thing I previously built. That's okay. Hey, if it's innovative, if it creates new ways and exciting things for developers to do, and it makes our jobs easier and more productive, great. Dragon Spirit is a learning-aholic. I like that a lot. Yup. Been programming for years, and nowadays it's hard to keep up with all the changes. Totally agree. Find that niche where you're comfortable, what makes you happy. I really like web development. I've been doing more and more mobile development recently, and I'm enjoying that. It doesn't make me as happy as web development. I enjoy it. But I do really enjoy web development. So that's where I'm going to kind of balance my skill set right now. So that's okay. Having the ability to pivot when you need to something else, Great. That makes you more valuable as a developer as well, because now you have insight into those other things. So, let me see here. TJ asks, will Entity Framework ever support AOT, ahead of time compilation? That's a question that Damien and David Fowler were talking about. It's not in the cards. I don't believe it's in the cards for .NET 8. There are some things that it uses reflection for. You can code generate a bunch of the code that Entity Framework would work with. You still can't ahead of time compile that, but it'll get you closer to that type of performance experience. So will it ever support it? I don't know. We would need to ask the Entity Framework folks and if it's ever on the agenda, but it's not currently going to get there. Did I study in university before working at Microsoft? I worked in the field. I worked in out in several different businesses for 12, 13 years before I started at Microsoft. So I'm one of those switch employees. There are folks that came out of college and they went and they got hired by Microsoft. Fantastic. I'm not. I have significant real world experience before I went to Microsoft. We're out of time on the AMA. I'll answer the last few questions here and then we'll jump over. And this is going to be more of a deployment discussion and session that we're going to be doing today. We're not going to write as much code today, but we're going to talk about and show you where you can find documentation for all the database. Not all, but for 5-6 different database options that are available for you out on Azure. When you try to enable developer mode, you can see some warning like it may harm. Yeah. Right, and that's the operating system folks saying we're lifting the guards on folks being able to build and run code on this system. It's blocked otherwise. So yeah, that's them offering that warning. Hey, we don't allow unsigned code to run here. Are you sure you want this to run? So it can harm the system in that you're going to allow unsigned code to run. And if there is some sort of a malware running on that system, it can generate code, compile and run something on that system. So that's the warning that they give. You're learning game development using C# and Unity. That's great, Dragon Spirit. Your sweet little Surface 3 is having trouble with that. Right. You start pushing and on your hardware and becomes a little bit tricky. Reflection emit doesn't work in AOT. That's correct. Jonathan on YouTube asks, what about web development for mobile? What about it? Yeah. Building web applications, websites that are compatible with mobile devices is an important thing. Almost half the folks that browse the web are on mobile devices. So yeah, I think that's something that is important for web developers to be aware of as they're building for the public web today. What do I recommend for someone interested in working at big tech to get their foot in the door? Is a degree worth it? Yes, a degree is worth it. And practice and write a lot of code. A lot of code. You need to know your languages and tools inside and out. Because quite frankly, the big tech companies, the FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, and Microsoft, Intel's not in there either, or IBM. Anyways, those companies can pick from the best of the best folks that work in the industry. So you better know and understand you're going up and competing with some of the smartest people in the world to get a job there. They don't just hire somebody who just graduated high school, 1 or 2 years at university, to start working on a compiler for a programming language or to help write features for Windows. They want to see that you're going to be a good fit and that you know your tools. You know the technology, how these things work. So be aware of that. Hey, Lou, good to see you. It doesn't matter to me if it's personal projects or if it's an open source project. Write code. Get to know how the tools work, where the performance issues are. Trying to get a Blazor component based site for a mobile browser. Okay. Not too hard to do. What problems are you having? Dragon Spirit was at a hackathon where they were using Yi lights and connecting them to GitHub Actions for build results. Yeah, that's neat stuff, isn't it? Big tech jobs require 10x GIF skills. Now, come on now. How you doing there, Alan? Should you make mathematics a daily read now with the advent of AI and F#? No. If you want to do more big math, if you think large math is something that you're interested in, it's definitely going to give you insight when you build and work with those things, but not necessarily required. There is so much. Yes, hello. You want to write code for exactly that reason, but struggle with ideas. Think about the things that you do all the time, multiple times a day. Think about the things that are a pain in the neck that you dread doing. How could you write code to relieve those? What is going to be what's going to be the steps to make that easier? Right? So, you lost your voice. So, we're not going to write code today, but we are going to talk about those various databases that are available out on the big Microsoft Azure that you can use with your applications. So this isn't even going to be limited to C#. You can use Python, Node, Java, choose your favorite language, and you can use, come on, go to the right website here. You can use those programming languages with these database options that are available out there. I've got a bunch of links to content that that we can see and dig in further about. I'm going to show you how to set up some of these things live, and we'll take a look at some of the databases out there. So I'm going to close that side panel. And let me head over to the code. It is this one. Doing the changeover. There we go. So I wrote a little bit content here. There's a link to the page that I have here with a bunch of links. I didn't put in screenshots in here for the SQL Server stuff. I can generate and put screenshots in for these later. I'm not sure how valuable they'll be, but we'll get them into the mix here as well. So, have a good one there, Dragon Spirit. Is there any way to have a hobby relational database on a 12-month-old Azure account? Yes. I'll show you that in a few minutes here. So, we're going to talk about a couple different databases here. We're going to talk about SQL Server, MySQL, Postgres, CosmosDB, and Redis. These are the big ones that are available out there. And of course, you can install and run any database on Azure using virtual machines. And there are several vendors that have their databases available for you to deploy out to Azure. I was using RavenDB for a long time out here. But I believe you can deploy Couch, you can deploy a whole bunch of different databases, and of course, You can run applications in containers. You can stand up virtual machines and install whatever you want out on Azure. But these are the ones when I think database as a service. I just want to get a database running out on Azure. These are the ones that folks think about. And of course, the top database that folks think about when they think about Microsoft Azure is Microsoft's database, SQL Server. There's a bunch of different ways that you can run SQL Server on Azure. Managed instances, Azure SQL, SQL Server on VM. Let's talk about what each one of these things are, okay? Quite simply, managed instances are versions of SQL Server that are compatible going back to the SQL 2008 version that are deployed and managed on machines for you that you can connect to and work with. It's an instance. You manage that instance. You work with that instance. But the rest of the content that lives and works around it, the tech resources that it consumes, are constrained by that instance. Okay, it's deployed and effectively running as just a version of content out on the cloud. Azure SQL is the one that I really like and that I'm using primarily over on my other streams. Fully managed, always up to date. It's literally just a database that you can connect to. I don't care what machines it's running on. I don't care the size of it. It's just out there. I have a slider on a console. I drag across to say, give me this number of processors. Give me this much. This much storage space. Done. And you can buy Azure. All of these you can specify. Well, how many processors do I want? How much RAM do I want? How much storage do I want? And there's this other option called DTUs that you can use, data transaction units, that are used to measure, well, how much activity is going on per second that I want to be able to run through my database. The final option that's available to you is this third one here, SQL Server on virtual machine. Quite literally, you stand up you get a virtual machine that has SQL Server installed on it, and you control and manage that just like it was in your data center, just like it was on premises. It's sitting there, and you configure and you work with it the exact same way. As a database administrator, you're a lot more involved and hands-on. You're involved in hands-on the same way you are on premises with the on virtual machine. You're a little bit less hands-on with the managed instance version. Azure SQL, that's where you're the least hands-on. You don't have to manage the operating system. You don't have to manage the hardware. You're only managing the database. Good set of options there. DJ Deepex has a question here. Are the databases on Azure backed up by default, or do I have to buy an additional backup service? Let's go configure one of these and take a look. There is even a serverless configuration that you can grab and you can work with if you have a database, to the question earlier about a hobby database, where if it's just you that connects in, serverless might be a good way to go, because when it's not running, it will stop and you won't be charged for how much the machine is running. There's still yet another option that I would recommend for you if you have a hobby project. Let's go over to the Azure portal. And I tell people to use the Azure portal to determine how much Azure you want to buy. Because it's going to give you a much more realistic... I didn't want to create a dashboard. I wanted to create a database. And I want a SQL database. Thank you. Take a SQL database. Give me a new one. So, create SQL database. Now, when you go and you create databases out here, you have all these options here. Is that the right account? Yes. I put everything on the same set of accounts here, and I deploy it and manage it. Will this be recorded for YouTube? It is on YouTube. And yes, it will be. It is available over there. So select a subscription. I'm going to put this on a different resource. I'll put it over here. And specify a name for your database. So let's call this C# with CSharpFritz. And I need to create a server. I have other servers that are out here for other applications. I'm going to create a new database server here, and I'll call this C# with CSharpFritz. I'm going to put it in East US, and now I have authentication methods. Well, how do you log into this thing? This is where things can get interesting. You must log in with Azure Active Directory. You must use SQL authentication. Azure Active Directory means you're logged into Azure, and it's going to use the same credentials that you're logged into Azure to log into your database. SQL authentication is your typical user ID password management that lives inside the database and is all managed in the database. There's no external management of that or dependent on another resource. Azure Active Directory is great if you want to have that central security management so that when Skippy decides, you know what, I'm taking another job, I'm leaving the organization, you can disable Skippy's account in Active Directory and they can't log into all those corporate resources and the database as well because their account's been disabled. Versus when it's in SQL Server, well, now I got to go around to all the databases and make sure that Skippy's user ID is disabled. Or worse, there's a common user that Skippy was using, and we need to rotate that password and let everybody know, hey, the password for the foo account is now bar123. Oh, gosh, now we got to go change all the code all over the place. So it's typically recommended in larger organizations use Azure Active Directory for this because it'll make it a heck of a lot easier to manage and deploy those credentials. And you can set up a administrator. There we go. So let's call this Fritz Systems Administrator. Password, I will make a very, very difficult to remember password here that doesn't match. It still doesn't match. What the heck did I type there? Yeah, I know. There we go. And they do match. Okay. And now I've got all kinds of options. What size do you want an elastic pool? Now, this is an interesting option. Elastic pools means that you can create and specify, well, we're going to use this much processing power and up to X amount of processing power, and it will scale appropriately as requirements come in. So that can carry and change your budget for how you deploy your database. New users in Azure can create a free SQL database and use it for 12 months. There's another option here that you can use. So I can create an elastic pool here and it'll allow me to define, let's call this CSharpFritz pool. And it's already throwing some cost information you need to know. But how big do you want this? So let's configure that. So this is what it's telling me, and I have different configuration options. I've been a big fan of the DTU model recently. vCore means you specify how many processors, how much RAM do I want. If I go down here and I specify DTUs, right away at 50 DTUs, it's $73 a month. For a hobby project, that's a lot of money, right? But I can bump that around and say, well, here's how big the pool is that I'm working with. And it will scale appropriately across that because pools can have many databases and you're sharing that pool of resources. Okay? So options that are available. For us, I'm going to create just a single database. And do I want this to be provisioned? It's a single database that's there and it's always running, and I'm going to be billed per hour that it's running. Or do we want it serverless, where it's going to start and stop appropriately? So to the question of, well, gosh, it's just a hobby project. Well, if I go to a basic DTU model, right? And where'd it go? Well, I'm on basic. It's $5 a month for 5 DTUs. For most operations that you're doing, the demos and things that we're showing, that's not bad at all. That's sure, that's great. I'm going to show you an option later where you can do this for free. So, but 2.6 gig, 30 cents a month if you get only, if you start off with half a processor, up to one full processor, and specifying that it'll automatically delay if there's no traffic for an hour. And how big do you want the database to be? 30 cents a month. That's fantastic. For other applications that I have, I'm in at about 100 gig. You can see how my price is changing. I need a bit more processing at times. And my auto pause, it's never going to auto pause, so I would turn that off. And my price is saying 15. I probably would prefer to get a little bit more performance out of it. And I'm starting to see my price get a lot more significant here. But if you're building higher throughput, more power required systems, you're going to pay more for it. So, right, and if I push that back up to, let's say, 10 with a minimum there, right, storage cost is 10 cents a month, and the replicas that you may, right, do I want a replica here? Sure, give me one replica. Do you want to make this database zone redundant? So do we spread it out so that the replicas are on other zones in the same location? These are all clustering concerns that you run into as you get larger. And that's a price per second. Okay? So if you're running the entire month, it's significantly higher than that. So let me go back here. I do like just 5 DTUs is great to get started here. I don't need, so there was a question about backups. Do I want locally redundant backup storage? Zone redundant, which means that it's going to be available within the same availability zone. I forget how the availability zones are allocated. Or do you want it deployed across different geographies, right? Gosh, keep a backup for my American database in Brazil so that those, geo-replicated, which might impact residency requirements. So there are requirements in some countries. If you're building an application that is working for the Canadian government, for a European government, well, if you're doing geo-redundancy, it might put a backup copy of your stuff in a continent that legally you're not allowed to do. So there's concerns, there's things you need to take a look at here. So For the typical small application, you're just getting started, locally redundant is fine. Networking capabilities. How do you connect to this database? You can set up private endpoints that you have to have access to. You can set up a public endpoint with a firewall that is limited to your IP address to let folks connect to, and specify, yes, other Azure folks are allowed to connect to it. So how do clients connect? Do they use the default redirect policy? Are they proxied via a database gateway? Or are they redirected directly to the node hosting the database? Lots of options. With SQL Server, things are always encrypted here. Hey, Stelzy, good to see you. I see a couple other questions there. Let me come back to them in just a second. I'm going to add my current IP address and allow other Azure services to get there. Microsoft Defender for SQL. No. Ledger, it verifies the integrity of your data, detects any tampering. If you were doing some sort of a validated system, I would consider using Ledger. Identities, transparent data encryption. So if you need encryption at rest, you can do that. Configuration for collation. When is the system maintenance window? Here we are. During a maintenance event, Azure SQL databases are fully available and accessible, but some of the maintenance updates require a failover as Azure takes SQL database instances offline. If the database is part of an elastic pool, the maintenance configuration of the pool will be applied. So, tags, if you want to tag them, that's strictly a key value pair for you. And then we can go create the database. And we have a database running. Let me catch up with chat. So, and there was a question about prototyping. So I have linked, there is an Azure SQL emulator that you can download and work with locally to develop and prototype with. Absolutely, you can check that out. This is a managed, this is Azure SQL that I stood up. If we want a managed instance, excuse me. It is right, SQL managed instances. There they are. And this will give you, right, so you need to specify, well, what's the instance that I'm running on? How many database cores does it have? How much storage does it have? And you see price. I mean, I'm asking for 8 cores, 256 gig. And what are you doing with it? This is not where you're going to be starting on the low end and building up to. Folks that are doing managed instances typically already have a version of SQL Server sitting somewhere and they're migrating it over. And then they take these types of prices. That price calculator that you see, that cost summary, that is where I trust the pricing to come in. The price calculators that you see on the front page of the Azure website, they're nice, but you're going to miss out on some of the things, and it can be intimidating to read that, but you're going to miss out on some of the configuration options that are available to you to go and configure. Hey, Todd Makes Games. It is, yes. You can still write C# using the base extension. Yes, you can. We talked about that at the beginning of the stream. Yep. Is the price sign write a new feature on Azure, or it only creates databases? No, it's that price bit that you saw over here. As you're choosing those, right, the things that affect the price of what it is, that cost summary is always going to appear there. So you're going to see that in other services as well when you choose scale of things. What are Azure blobs or Azure storage? We talked about that on a previous stream. Azure blobs are effectively file storage that's available for you out there. Amazon calls theirs S3, but it's a way for you to define and store. It's a way for you to configure and store files that are accessible out in the cloud. So, let me go back over here, and there we go to that resource. So, there's my database. I can click into compute and storage here, and I can see, well, here's how much is allocated, and if I need to increase or change that, I can very easily jump in here and say, well, we're doing something that's pretty big. I need to add some more DTUs to it, and it's going to update that cost summary and show you, well, if you're going from, we were on but basic, if you're going from 2 gigs and 5 DTUs at $5 a month, right? You start to get a feel right away that, okay, price is changing because I'm turning on these other features here. And I need to be aware of that. I'm trying to make sure that you can see that, but it's stacking them here for me. So you're aware of it before you press that apply button. All right. So this does update, right? So I'll flip it to standard and I'll drag this out to 50 DTUs, and it's going to be that much a month. It does this update very quickly. So I clicked into notifications, and down here it says there's one operation, and it's the scaling operation. It's moving and changing it. It's doing this online for you. You don't have to take anything down, see availability change. This is all happening online, and there will come a point where requests and connections to the database will just flip over to the new instance, the new sized database that's been allocated. A friend of TJ's wants to be a solutions architect and wanted to know if you needed to know code to become one. I think so, because you need to know a bit of how the solution works that you're directing people to build. So, yeah, I think so. Hey, Rita, good to see you. All right. So, I mean, I told this to jump up to larger database size, and we'll have that running in just a few minutes here. Not even. But there are options here to connect up to Power BI. It'll give you performance recommendations for SQL Server. It'll show you some queries that are performing slow on your database. If there's alerts, things aren't running well, it'll pop alerts over there. You can get metrics for how your database is performing here and see those and push these onto your dashboard. You saw I have a couple of graphs that are up front that I can consult. And of course, database logs. I can run queries against the database logs, see how things are performing out there. Now, what I've done with the ClipTalk database that I work on in production over on my stream, I've created a read-only replica. So I can create a replica here, and yes, I need to give it a new name. Or I need to put it on a different server. So CSharp 2. Thank you. And I have to set up SQL administration, Fritz SA. And it's going to provision by default the same size that I currently have my other database on. And Yep, go ahead and create. So that's going to create the server. Why is it on GeoReplica? Did I leave it on GeoReplica? Once that database server is created, I can push a replica over there. And we'll be able to see and work with it. Very elastic. Oh, yes. That's what you call an analyst programmer. So that's building and deploying. This one here. What? Oh, that's the one that it's building and deploying right now. So the notification is gone. If we go to compute and storage, this is now running with 50 DTUs. So, and I should be able to create that replica now because the other database exists. Nope, not yet. Still deploying. So, this is fantastic for when you need to scale up. There was the question earlier about, well, I've got multiple offices. How many SQL databases do I need? Depends. I don't know. But as you're going to see here in just a few minutes, I'm going to point this back to the other database and say, make this a replica, and we're off and running. Cool. Replicas are great for moving those read operations closer to your audience. You don't always have to do this, but it's possible. It's an option that's available to you. Are we done there yet? Come on now. All right, I'm going to let this finish on its own here. So lots of options for SQL Server. We deployed. I showed you how the firewall is configured. Let me go back one more time to the other one that I had out there. So if you need to get other folks connected, you want to change the, oh, there's your connection strings, right? So if you're connecting with Active Directory, if you're connecting with SQL, there's your connection strings for it. And for other languages, similar connection strings and code to get you started. Where is... I know I've gone past it probably two or three times here. Oh, it's not on... this is the database. This isn't the database server. No, I thought I had... Hang on. I thought there was a network tab. Why am I not seeing it? Alerts, metrics, diagnostics, tasks. No, it might be... Yeah, there it is. So on the server, I can add my network connections here to allow folks to be able to connect and work with. Cool. Easy to do. I can disable public access. I can add virtual networks here so that an entire office is on a VPN effectively and able to tunnel and get to this. Typically, you want to leave this on for things on your Azure. On your Azure cluster, you may want to set up a virtual private network on Azure that only your things can access and be able to constrain that. You can do that with a virtual network option here. Okay. Sure looks like it. Yes, it did finish. Okay. So if I turn that into a replica, there it is. So geographically replicated. It's readable over there, and we can get to it, and we can see that there's the size of the database that's deployed as a replica over here for me to connect into. I believe it's a read-only replica. So we can connect in and read data from there. All right, cool. Options. These are all options and things that you can do. Go back to that because I want to knock that down. I don't need this. That's the... It's not going to let me do that. I need to knock down the replica first. Over here. That one. And delete. Yep, and it's going to knock out that database that was part of it. Okay. Folks like using the open source databases, MySQL, Postgres. They are available out there. I have links to information about them. Of course, you can stand up and create a Postgres database. Yeah, Azure database for Postgres. So I'm not going to get into Azure Arc. Single server is the way it used to be, where it's literally, hey, this is an instance running on a machine. You can't really control the machine, but it's a single instance. Flexible server is where they're pushing folks towards, where it's going to scale and allocate resources across n number of machines. And quite frankly, you don't care. You just care that you get a database. And for redundancy, it's just out there and doing its thing. Now, we're going to get into this one on the right in just a few minutes. But I can easily create this Postgres database, walk through the options here, and key in information about server name and choose how big is my database, how many cores, how many IOPS, how many IO operations per second do you want, how big is storage, how long do you want backups to run, so on and so forth. I didn't get in and show backups for SQL Server. And 2 cores, 128 gig of disk space. How much RAM was on that? 8 gig of memory. You don't have the DTU options over here because you're literally buying sizes of machines. Same thing with MySQL. Okay. So if I ask for Azure database for MySQL and we tell it to create one, I have flexible server. I have an option to configure with WordPress. You're building a blog, you're building a news site, you can stand it up real easy. And same configuration options, configure server, and once again, I'm buying a certain amount of storage size, compute power, and disk speed. All right, that's fine. What about... We saw this stuff pop up about Cosmos. Let's talk about Cosmos for a second. So Cosmos is kind of the do-anything database. Bunch of different options for ways that you can interact with your data inside of it. It's got NoSQL features, MongoDB APIs, Postgres APIs, Cassandra APIs if you want to do that column store database, Gremlin if you need graph database features, and even key value pairs, just like Azure Table Storage. In fact, you're going to use the exact same APIs for each one of these inside your code to interact with CosmosDB. This is where there's a free option out here. Oh, I did the create dashboard again. there's all the different ways. How do you want to interact with Cosmos? Create appropriately which one you want. And then you can do whatever is appropriate for your application. So maybe I do want a Cassandra database. Okay. So this is going to give me the Cassandra APIs to interact with it. And I can choose where I want to put it. And it's going to charge me request units and database as it gets provisioned. Now, I have the ability to choose and scale that how I want. It's a little bit further down here. Come on. Go back over here. I'll do this. Sure, that's fine. Right here. If you're building a hobby project, you can stand up one CosmosDB for your account. Not subscription, for your account. And you'll get 1,000 request units per second and 25 gigabytes of storage. Request unit is just a measure of how much query goes through here. All right. But 25 gig of storage, 1,000 request units. And yeah, it's effectively a $64 discount. That is a huge database for a hobby project that you get for free. Not just for free for 12 months. Free. It can be Cassandra, it can be MySQL, it can be Mongo, it can be whichever API you want. And you're going to get all of that free. So we can limit the total amount there. Cosmos is known for geo-redundancy. It'll automatically deploy and put content in other regions for you. So if there's a failure in one region, it'll automatically roll over to other regions. Question here, what's the definition of request? Does it include tables and index scans? Yes. And depending on the size of your table, will determine how many request units it's doing. But it's request units per second. Oh, it was right there. So it's the cost of all database operations normalized into a number, a statistic. It abstracts system resources, CPU, IOPS, and memory. The cost to read 1 kilobyte item is 1 request unit. A minimum of 10 request units per second is required to store each gigabyte of data. So it may happen one request may be consuming 2 request units, while other requests may consume 4 other request units. The request units per second are not the same as the number of request units. That's a very good point there. So, yeah, and setting throughput information. So, when you estimate the number of request units, consider the following factors. The size of the item. So if you have a record that's stored in your database that includes a 10K blog article, that 10K to load is going to take it's going to take a little bit more of a request unit to load that up. And indexing is going to affect the number of request units, the number of properties, the number of index properties, data consistency, that's important. So how consistent do you need to be across regions, across deployments of Cosmos? So Point reads cost fewer request units than queries. So if you're selecting, right, select star from employees where name is Jeff Fritz. Well, reading that one data point is going to be, you know, a smaller, significantly smaller number of request units than, right, select star from employees where last name equals Fritz. There's going to be a bunch of folks named Fritz because my whole family works for this company, darn it. And that's going to impact the number of request units you use. Yeah, per second, that 1,000 request units per second. So if you have 1,000 people that are requesting, right, if you have 1,000 applications that are requesting single records from a database, from the database at the same time, that's okay. You can do that. But when they do queries and they're scanning across, you're not going to be able to push 1,000 requests through on that 1,000 requests per second. That's going to need to scale back to 500, 200, because each one of those queries is going to be reaching and using more. So either the queries are going to take longer, or you're going to have less folks able to make requests per second. Let me pick up here on the questions in chat. Lucas on YouTube. How you doing there, Lucas? Lucas says, I could use Postgres Entity Framework NuGet package that would be used for real Postgres with migrations and all and connect this. Yes, that's right. Spot on. So here, let me back out of this, right? So Luke, you could set up Azure Cosmos for Postgres. Create one of those, right? And put it on, that's not the right location. Put it over here. Nope. Fritz and Friends. And I can specify where I want it to go. I can configure the scale. And where's the DTUs here? The request units. Only supports a vCore. Okay, Postgres only supports vCore. My bad. But does MySQL? I'm sorry, not that one. So doing other storage, MongoDB is very similar. And if I do it as a request unit over here, you're going to get similar table layout capabilities over here, but the power of NoSQL. And you can get that free tier applied on that one. So Postgres is not available. My mistake. Your code wouldn't know the difference working with Cosmos Postgres. However, you will need to choose the number of nodes that you want, the size, and it's going to affect that. I thought Postgres was included in that free. My apologies. Offices will be quite small, maybe 30 people per office and maybe 20 locations. You could probably get away with that with one database. You could probably get away with that. Oliver, you could probably get away with one. Kind of like merge replication? Yes. Start small and see how you go. Totally. Start with one database and you can drag that slider across. Hey, I need more DTUs. Or what I've found, all right, so if I go back to over here and go back into that database, what I've found is I've got 50 DTUs here and it's $73. Well, if I jump that up, my next one is 100 and it's 147. It's roughly the same price as 2 databases. But if I consume all the DTUs on this one instance for doing some operation, I don't have operations and DTUs reserved for other interactions. So that's why I've moved to a primary and read-only model for my application, because my primary is only using 50 DTUs, and it does read-write operations, and there's times where it gets 100% DTU, and other operations are driven to very, very slow interactions. However, the folks that are accessing the website that are doing mostly read-only interactions, those folks, I want to get very fast, non-blocking interactions. So they go to the read-only database. And because they're doing just selects, it comes through much, much quicker. Options. This is what makes us, not just as software developers, but as system architects, valuable, because we're choosing, does it make more sense to buy one big database with lots of DTUs, or does it make sense to set up 3 databases with a primary and 2 read-only replicas, and we push the folks that are doing read operations to those read-only replicas, and only when they need an update do we push content to the update. Think about if you're running a store, if you're running Etsy, you're running Walmart.com, those types of places, right? A shop. 99% of the folks that are interacting with that website, they're just searching. So they're querying, hey, I want to find bedding that is in that's blue and it's heavyweight for the winter here. Well, they're going to do that search. Do they really need to hit the primary database where it's writing, or can they hit one of the faster optimized read-only databases? Go over there. Or even bring in a search appliance. Those options are available to you as well. We'll talk about search and cognitive services in a future stream here. So there is a ton to learn. Can you throttle the request units? Yes, and we actually saw that on the Create CosmosDB screen. Yes, you can. Does Cosmos support ScyllaDB? I'm not familiar with what that is. Is it possible to limit in maybe EF only to use 1,000 requests? I don't know. I don't think you can. $5 SQL Server will already be enough. That's great, Lucas. There you go. Yeah, Cosmos, you absolutely can limit the request units, but it's on Azure that you can throttle that. But being able to, I like where you're going of saying, well, I'm in my database interactions in Entity Framework. This operation, I only want to use at most 5 request units. I don't think you can do that. I haven't been exposed to that. Yep, the free tier, that's right, UNESCO. That's something that we hit and discussed. We showed just a little bit ago. Yep. Last database that I want to show you is Redis. And I just put a link to the information about Redis in here. Redis, in my mind, this is the secret sauce that I don't think folks appreciate. That quite literally, you can. I'm gonna steal a phrase from my friend Donovan Brown. You can rub a little Redis on your application, and it gets significantly faster. Redis is an in-memory data store that is optimized so that it is key value pair and it reads very, very quickly. Now, this same architecture is available table storage on CosmosDB. So you can deploy and run that same configuration. But the Redis configuration that's out here is stupid fast. I have one instance out here. This is the smallest instance that you can buy. And we'll just click in and I'll show you what this one looks like. I'm only using about, 30 megabytes right now of 250. This is a basic configuration, and it stores and reads data in single-digit milliseconds, okay? I'm not storing that much data here yet. Where is that? There you go. Scale. And it's $16 a month. you can put entries in the database and specify that it expires at a certain time. You can have it trigger other interactions that happen here. You can use Redis almost as a queue if you'd like. But you can also set up and have lots of connections that are allowed to come in and read data. You can also set this up so you have multiple instances and configure a cluster of these. Yeah, I'm not in the right tier. But down here in the premium tier, when you start paying for gigabytes of cache, gigabytes of memory laying out there that you're going to access quickly, price starts going up significantly. Like, be aware, lots of data is available to you to keep these things in memory. It starts to cost money, big money to do that. So what I do like about this, and there's a NuGet package available to you from the folks at Stack Exchange that you can use to connect in and read and write data into here. And I've put just this basic instance for $16, and I'm barely touching it right now. I have it caching content for my blog in there. I have it caching content for ClipTalk in there. And as a cache on the side of the database, right? Hey, I'm going to read this data. Is it in the cache? No. Go get the data, put it in the cache, and leave it there for the next half hour. If other folks come in and they want to read and get the same data, it's in the cache. If something happens and I change the data in the database, well, I can reach into the cache and either refresh it or I can pluck it out of there. Options. There are options that are available to you. And this is where us as architects, right, become valuable again. When and how do I layer this in? If I can add that in-memory cache and read from there instead of a 10 request unit query from Cosmos, I'm pulling it from here because I've already calculated it, cache it so that I don't have to go to Cosmos. That frees up Cosmos to be able to do other things. And I can hit this and pull back the data faster. Nice. Zellian asks, isn't CosmosDB based on Citus? It's. I thought there were. I thought there was some part of it that I think was. Yeah, the Postgres is extended with Citus. Yes, so gets you significant power on your Postgres database when you're working with it. You're right, Zellian. Yep. So, DJ Deepax asks, is Azure Redis limited to bandwidth, or is it always using the fastest way? There is bandwidth there, right? I'm on shared infrastructure here, dedicated service, but you can see low network bandwidth, moderate bandwidth. Doesn't specifically say exactly how much network bandwidth you get. High network bandwidth down here. For the applications that I'm building for caching content for my blog, I don't need that much network. As I'm scaling up, though, maybe I do want to bring in some more network. Maybe I am storing more data. So let's put it down and be able to work with that. If you're planning using Citus or switch over to MySQL with Vitis, nice. Okay. So, that gets me to the end of the stream. I wanted to just do this tour of these several database options that are available, show you how easy it is to get these up and configured. Literally, this has completely changed the performance characteristics for ClipTalk, the application I'm building over there on the other stream. If you look at my compute utilization, I rolled that out over the weekend. Okay? Can you see where Redis is starting to work now? This was an operation, maintenance operation that I was running. But look at how I went from 40 to 50% DTU utilization on the pink is the average, not the max, the average. I went from 40 to 50% DTU utilization on average to now down here where I am 10, 20%, 30% utilization. Significant change in how I use it. Now I want to go back and look at these operations in here, these maintenance tasks. What can I do to optimize those? Can I push more content into Redis or into blob storage so that I'm not doing this significant operation? It costs me $16, $17 a month, and I might be able to scale this back and save $30 a month and use less DTUs in Azure SQL. Okay. Balance. We have to learn balance. We have to decide. And when we learn and we measure, that's something that we learned from Damien and David's session talking about performance. We need to measure things, see the impact, and decide what to roll out. Lots of very cool stuff that we can do there. Like I said, I just wanted to do a tour. Yeah, just a tour to go through here. Really informational, not so much about, gosh, how do I use SQL Server? How do I write to Redis? If that's something you're interested in, I might record a short video and get that published over on my YouTube channel. How I added Redis to ClipTalk and saw performance savings. These are things that if you don't know they're available to you, you aren't going to consider them as options to grow and enhance your application. And then as our applications experience both growth and decline as they're being retired, knowing that I can either slide that number of DTUs or processors up and down, manage my budgets appropriately, those are options that you need to know are available to you so that you can manage your budgets. My blog seems down. Should be up. I was just there about an hour ago. Yeah, jeffreyfritz.com. I can get there. Yep. And if I go to csharpfritz.com, that was responding as well. It's the same website. It looks like the DNS is having an issue with the CSharpFritz resolution. Go to jeffreyfritz.com. You'll get the same place. Yeah. jeffreyfritz.com will get you in and get you navigated around a little bit faster. There we go. Just now got your VM to work. Hey, good for you. So that's all the time I had for today. Let's those of you that are out there on YouTube, there's tons of great videos on the .NET channel. Check them out. They're probably listed right over here or maybe right below me. There's all kinds of videos in this series, in this playlist. Learn C# with CSharpFritz. I want you to check those out. Tell your friends. There's folks out there that want to learn about C# that they don't know where to look. They're going on third-party forums that don't really talk about .NET or C#. Let them know where you can find more about the product over here, because we think it's a fantastic resource for folks that are interested in doing more and be more productive computing and building applications. Taking a look around the horn here, for those that are on Twitch, let's see where we can get you connected. Go find some more content to have some fun over there. Looking here, I'm not seeing too many folks that are actively broadcasting on that are friendly to the Visual Studio channel here. I think we're just going to shut it down today. Yeah, I'm not going to do a raid today. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Absolute pleasure being with you. I'll be back next Wednesday. Wednesdays, 9 a.m. Eastern, where we'll be talking about and building more here. I want to talk about containers next time. How do we build containers? Where do we deploy them? What can we do with them? What's Azure Container Apps? How do we work with that? So we'll be writing some code and deploying those containers out there. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have I didn't stop the music. There we go. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, wherever you might be. I wish you good health and good coding. Take care. Is that the button? I think that's the button. Oh, yeah.